Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us again today. Well, we have passed the 20,000 views mark on Debbie's Back Porch, and I just want to take a minute to thank you all so much. It actually feels pretty good to think that folks enjoy our videos enough to watch them, and we've also had quite a spurt of growth in our groups on Facebook, so that feels good too, to know that people like to come and be with us in our groups and learn how to cook from scratch and to grow organically and to safely preserve, and to learn to knit and crochet and sew and quilt and all of those home skills that seem to be coming back to folks as valued skills. So we're very happy about this, and we owe it all to you. Thank you so much. Well, tomorrow we're going to have spare ribs for dinner, for Sunday dinner, and there's a little preparation for that for me because I like to make a very special barbecue sauce, and this is not something you can or make ahead. This is something you make, generally I make it the day before. When we barbecue inside, this is not on the grill, this will be inside, I don't actually put sauce on the meat. I roast the meat, and then I have the sauce to add later as a dipping sauce or to pour directly onto the ribs. So I take a little extra time with the sauce, and I've actually never shared this recipe before, so this will kind of be a first. It's Debbie's not so secret barbecue sauce, but it's a little bit different than what you normally get. So we're going to get started, and the sauce won't be finished until late tonight, so I'll just give you little clips of it as I go. Once again, let me remind you, the barking and the grunting and the groaning and the snoring that you hear, it's not livestock in the kitchen, it's my dogs. And they're little bitty and kind of spoiled, and so when you hear the snoring, it's not a pig, it's my dog Bobby, and he welcomes you to our kitchen too. Let's get started. Well, my barbecue sauce starts with apples, and I have here some dehydrated apples. That I actually dehydrated last fall. And we're going to start by rehydrating these on the stove on low heat. I'm only showing you this because this is only one way to start, and I'll tell you, if you have applesauce, you can skip this step because the applesauce is just fine. When I get these cooked and rehydrated, there'll be applesauce. You could use apple butter. You could use fresh apples. The apple butter already has some of the spices in it, and when I have apple butter, I actually prefer to start with that. So when we get to that point, I'll tell you the alternate recipe to use if you're starting out with apple butter. But I'm going to let these simmer on the stove for actually a couple hours, very slow, covered until they get soft and start coming apart, and then we'll do our next step. Okay, now we're going to take the next step. As you can see, these dried apples have cooked up, and they're soft and they're yummy. As I say, if you want to start out with apple butter now, these next few steps you don't have to take. We've got about, well, let's see how much we have. What I want to do is drain off the excess liquid. I could just let it cook down forever like you do apple butter, but I'm not going to do that. And we've got about 2.5 cups of apples here. got this little bit of liquid left that I'm going to pour off. I ended up with about 2 cups of cooked apples. So you're talking about a pint of apple butter. Now I'm going to add that's 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar, or in my case, fake brown sugar, because you know I don't use sugar, and that's one of the reasons I make my own barbecue sauce and my own ketchup, is because I try to avoid sugar. I'm going to turn this up to a little above a medium heat, because I'm going to let it cook kind of hard for a little while. Now, thinking apple butter again, I'm going to add pretty much the things I would add to apple butter. That's about a teaspoonful of cinnamon. And it's about a 1/2 teaspoonful of ground cloves. And I'm going to taste that because, you know, the sweetness of apples varies. And I want this to be pretty sweet. So we have 2 cups of cooked apples. We have a teaspoonful of cinnamon. About a 1/2 teaspoonful of cloves. And we're going to taste for sweetness. That's pretty sweet. I don't think I'm going to add any more. Now I've got a 1/4 cup Now I have a 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar. Now I'm going to let this cook and thicken up, and then we'll move on to the next step. And then the next step is, this barbecue sauce is a mixture of sweet and savory. So here is our sweet side. Now we're going to move to the savory side. Okay, now we're going to start working on the savory side. I have some oil getting hot there, as you can see. Just a couple tablespoons full, just barely enough to cover the bottom of the pan. I have here 1 onion that I have minced up in the food processor. And I did it in the food processor instead of my normal just chopping, because I really want it to be fine. Almost, but not quite liquefied. And I have 2 tablespoons full of minced garlic. turn that down just a little. I've got it pretty low. I want this to get kind of toasty. Spreading it out. To that, I'm going to add about a 1/4 teaspoonful of red pepper flakes. Not too much. Add about a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I'm going to add just a pinch, like a 1/4 teaspoonful of jerk seasoning, and that's up to you. I like the tiny little bit of bite that you get from the jerk seasoning. Some people might like to add some chili powder. And I really do want to get the toasty flavor there. So we're going to let that simmer for a few minutes. I'll be back. Okay. Look, you see we're getting a toasty brown color. And I smell, nothing smells better than onion and garlic cooking. I have here a quart of my home canned tomato sauce. Now, I've opened some of these jars already, so I can tell you that this sauce is sweet, sweet, sweet. I didn't put any sugar in it. It's just naturally sweet from cooking down the tomatoes. And if I hadn't known that, I might have put just a little bit more sugar in the apples. So I'm telling you that to tell you, you may end up needing more sugar in your apple mixture. And then you should taste it and decide. Okay. I'm going to turn this up to a medium heat. I'm going to let it simmer and bubble and reduce because I want it to thicken up, because I want a nice brown color and I want the flavor from the tomatoes and the onions and the garlic and the spices all cooking together. In the meantime, our apple mixture, this is my tomato spoon so it doesn't matter, our apple mixture is getting pretty thick. and I just tasted it. And it tastes yummy. So we're going to let all of this just sit here and simmer, probably for about an hour, and I'll check back with you. As usual, I forgot something. I'm going to add about a half a teaspoonful of dried mustard. Which I forgot. It is pretty important. You can use your regular processed mustard if you like. But I like to add the dried mustard. Okay, now we leave it to simmer for about an hour, and I'll be back. Just checking in with you. It's been 30 minutes, and the savory part still needs to cook a little bit longer, but the sweet part has cooked enough, I think. All of the liquid has cooked up. So we're going to turn it off and let it wait on our tomato part to get done. About another 30 minutes. We're reducing it down, letting it get thick. We'll be back. Okay, this has not been quite an hour. It's been about 45 minutes. But you can see we've got a nice, thick, tomatoey sauce here. And our apples are already cooked down. So I'm going to combine these two, and then I have one more ingredient to add. And then we're going to taste it. As I said, I always end up using substitutes for sweeteners because I am diabetic, but I haven't always been diabetic. And when I first started making this recipe, I added honey at this point. And I wait till the end to add this last ingredient because I didn't want it cooking so long. And since I can no longer have honey, even though if I were you making this recipe and not limited on my sugar intake, I would add honey. But I'm going to add, or I would add real maple syrup. But I cannot have those things, and so I'm adding a half cup of artificial maple syrup. Because to me, barbecue sauce is supposed to have a sweet flavor. And once again, we need smell-o-vision. Let me get a spoon. That is so good. And so much of this recipe is for you to do to taste. If you like it hotter and spicier, you can put more red pepper in. You can put chili powder in. The main part of this that I never change is that it's apples or apple butter or apple sauce. But apples made sweet and then tomatoes made savory and mixed together. I'm going to let this cool. The last step I do that you don't necessarily have to do, but when it gets cool, I put it in a jar and hit it with an immersion blender to get the smoothness to it. And it'll be the consistency of, say, ketchup. So after I've done that, I'll come back and show you what I have. Well, there you have it. Rich, creamy, sweet and savory, thick, homemade barbecue sauce. There are 100 variations you can make on this. And tomorrow night, we're going to have it on spare ribs. Try this. You'll like it. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch.